Hey guys, welcome back to Grind Season Outdoors. Today we're out doing a little bit of shed hunting. We're going to hit it pretty hard this weekend. It's still kind of early, late February right now, and usually we don't like to try to get to a lot of the good stuff until the middle of March. But this year we have a lot going on in the middle of March. We're not going to be able to shed hunt quite as much as what we usually do, so we're kind of spreading it out, and luckily we haven't had fresh snow for a long time, and everything's been melting off really good. There's hardly any snow out in the fields anymore. So we're just gonna hit some fields this weekend. But I wanted to go through and just give you guys probably some of the best shed hunting tips that you've ever heard. I'm gonna give you some of my opinions, and the stuff, it's not all 100% right or 100% what you guys should do across the whole country or anything like that, but I'm just gonna share with you some of the really good advice that I've learned over the past decade or so of doing a lot of shed hunting, and we found probably over 1,000 sheds by now, so we have that to kind of put to our credit. But the first thing that I want to jump into is just the time frame that you actually want to look for sheds. Like I already kind of touched on, we're out here in February, and at this point I think probably about 75% of the deer have dropped their antlers. And we actually just seen a deer on this property when we were coming in this morning that had both sides. But we just have so many properties that we're shed hunting, and we picked up a lot of really good stuff this year. So we want to get out and at least cover everything and get through all of it. So we're basically starting, I mean, we walked around a little bit last week and just checked a hay pile and did some stuff like that, but we're basically just starting to hit everything right now. And it's, I believe, like February 20th-ish, so that's kind of the earliest that you guys are going to want to get out there. You also don't want to be walking through like your good properties, all the woods and everything like that, too early, because the deer, especially the big bucks, if they feel pressure, they're going to move, and they're just going to go to wherever there is a pressure. So you don't want to be kicking your deer out of your property before they lose their antlers, and then they go drop somewhere else where you can't walk. So I think, in my opinion, the best time to actually get out and walk and look is when there isn't any snow left, because you just never know how early they dropped or where they dropped, and a lot of times I feel like they're covered up by snow. But if you get out there at the right time when there's no snow and all the sheds are on the ground, that's going to put all the odds in your favor. And in my opinion, that time frame is going to be the middle of March to late March. And over the years, I've been able to almost just feel it out, and it seems like that's always when we're just finding sheds at the highest rate, and it seems like we don't see any bucks, or hardly any bucks, with antlers on their head in that time frame. So that's always just been kind of the ticket around here. But I'm in northeast Iowa, so it might be different if you go really far up north or further down south. So like I said, everything isn't 100% accurate, but I would suggest just trying to figure out the best time frame and spend some time scouting, spend some time actually trying to figure that part of it out, because if you can figure out when most of your deer are dropped and when it's going to be the easiest to find them, that's really going to help you have more success when it comes to shed hunting. So that's pretty much everything I have to say as far as timing goes. But now I'm going to get into kind of the location, or what you want to look for. So every property kind of sets up a little bit differently, and you know, obviously you want to have good bedding, you want to have a good food source, but what a lot of people don't talk about is that in the winter time, especially here in the Midwest, the deer are gonna spend a lot of time in the woods just feeding on browse and stuff in the woods. So having a good food source might not necessarily mean having standing beans, standing corn, or hay or anything like that. It might mean just a really good woods with a lot of good low growth and a lot of good browse in that woods. One good way that you can go about just trying to figure out what a good food source is by watching the deer throughout every winter and seeing where they're hanging out and how they feed in different areas with different types of weather. You know, when it gets colder, they'll usually tend to do different things as when it's warmer out. And one thing I've noticed too is that the deer will shift a lot during the winter time. They'll hit a food source for a few weeks, or maybe even just a couple days, and then they'll move on and they'll completely move to a new area. So if you're kind of taking mental notes throughout the winter on where your deer are feeding, you might have an area where they're only in there for a couple weeks, but it's in that couple weeks when they could be dropping antlers. And then after it snows, there might not be a track out there, but there still could be an antler out there. So never write anything off. The best thing you can do is just cover as many miles and cover everything. If you have a question about it, or if you don't know if there could be antlers there, just go look. So other things to look for that I really like are obviously south-facing slopes. Those are gonna hold the most heat and melt off first. But particular on the south-facing slopes, you wanna try to have some grass on it. The grass just seems like it holds heat really good, or any type of low grow or anything like that. It'll hold the heat in. And then if you can mix in cedar trees with anything, that's always awesome. The deer, they like to get up under those cedars, and they feed on them a little bit, and they just use them as overhead cover. And the cedars have really played a big key in us finding a ton of sheds. So any type of grass or woods that has cedars mixed in, or as much diversity as possible, that's the best. So now that I've gone over a little bit about the timing and where you want to look, I just want to give a few tips that I think are going to be extremely helpful for everyone. Some of this stuff, it might not be wise of me to give away, because if people in the area are watching this, it might work against me, but I'm going to go ahead and share it anyway. I feel like helping everyone get out there and enjoy it is the main thing, and we still have plenty of places to look and find plenty of sheds every year. But the first little nugget that I want to give you guys is that when you're looking for places to shed hunt, you need to go, you want to get permission. Don't be sneaking around and doing all that kind of stuff. So when you go to get permission for places, you have to be respectful and try your best to get on the same level as people and introduce yourself and let them know who you are, and just be a likable person. So kind of what I try to do is just, if I'm meeting someone new, I'll try to find someone that they might know that I know, so that it kind of gives us a connection. You don't want to sound like a complete stranger when you're talking to someone about going on their land. So just trying to talk to people that you've never met before, like you almost know them in some sort of way, can really help you get permission for spots. And when I'm looking for spots to get permission for, I'm not always looking for just a huge 100-acre chunk of woods. Sometimes it might be just a 10-acre field that I've seen them feeding in. So just keep that in mind. You don't always have to find the best stuff to shed hunt. You can just find little breadcrumbs here and there. It's just the same as bow hunting or doing any other kind of hunting. You don't need the prime stuff to be able to find sheds. And honestly, some of the best fields that I've ever found sheds in have been really small fields that the deer have just been tearing apart. And you could go find 5, 6, or even more sheds in one little tiny spot. Also, another big key piece of advice that I'd like to give you: everyone's out there super early, going through public land, and I have definitely dabbled with some public land before. You can find big sheds on public land, you can find a lot of sheds on public land, but the key is you either have to get out early and beat other people to it, or you have to find land that is kind of off the beaten path, or get to the back of it where most people aren't walking. Those are kind of the obvious things that I'm sure a lot of you guys have already done or already know about. But the big one that I've actually had quite a bit of success with is waiting until late March or April, because it seems like everyone these days is trying to get out before everyone, and they're all going out in February or early March. And I think a lot of the deer that are still holding at that time frame drop after people walk those public pieces. And if you go through after all the snow's gone, after people have walked through it, and then go through on a wet, rainy day where you can see everything really good and the sheds stick out in the woods and the fields, all that stuff, you could definitely go through and pick up what's left over. So those are kind of just a few little tips that I think will really help you guys find some more sheds. But the biggest thing is just getting out there and spending the time, putting on the miles. And last but not least, I think the most important thing to finding more sheds is scouting. It's the same thing as scouting for deer. If you spend more time scouting, you're gonna know more about what's going on. So if you spend some more time scouting, driving around before dark in the wintertime, or even if you have snow and full moons, you can get out, you can drive around and just see where the deer are at. I spend a lot of time coyote hunting in the wintertime, so I spend a lot of time actually watching deer at nighttime when they're out at night feeding in the fields, and they'll get out in the field and feed all night, lay down, and they spend a lot of time in certain areas at night that you'd never really expect them to be. So get out and do some scouting and just put on some miles. That's going to be your best bet, and you will find sheds. So good luck, everyone. I hope I helped you guys out and gave you some good advice, but we're going to get to it. We got the dog with us. Caitlin's here today, and we got a weekend full of shed hunting. Got some good land to walk, and hopefully we can find some.